us come to the second part of this workshop, which is basically on grant writing. इसकी वो light बेशक off कर दें. So what is grant funding and its types? Why do you or should you want grant funding? So what are the ingredients of successful grant proposals? What is a business plan? Because when you begin to write a grant proposal, oftentimes you're also required to write a business plan. Managing the grant. So you've obtained the grant. Now the question is, how do you manage it? What happens after the project completes? So what is grant funding? So funds donated or awarded by a grantor or donor or funder to a grantee, donee or fundee, so to speak, to promote certain objectives. That is what is considered a grant. So now the themes and areas are usually defined by the grantor or the donor in their RFPs, means request for proposals, or the NOFO, means the notice of funding opportunity, or the EOI, the expression of interest. So these are different terminologies that are used by different organizations to invite funding to invite grant proposals. And in each of those invitations, the thematic areas are usually well defined. So you want to make sure that you have a good idea of the thematic area before you begin to draft your proposal. Now, what kind of grantor and donor organizations exist? Of course, there are various international, national, regional, sometimes even within institutions. There are public and private different organizations. Who can be a grant recipient? Of course, that varies upon the eligibility criteria defined in the invitations by the donor organizations. So it depends on the donor organizations and their objectives. It could be as an individual. You might be able to apply as an individual, and in some cases you need to apply as an organization. So you cannot apply as an individual. So this varies. So there are some national and regional. Of course, you are well aware that the Higher Education Commission invites a number of grant proposals. There is the NRPU, National Research Program for Universities. There is the LCF, Local Challenge Fund. I think there's a GCF, Global Challenge Fund. There is a Technology Development Fund, which I was able to obtain a grant of the TDF some years back. And then there are different other grants that are given by the HEC. Since the Higher Education Commission has also started giving grants, I think it's been about 2 or 3 years. I believe the amount is much small. It's even less than 1 million, but I believe they have begun awarding grants. The Punjab Higher Education Commission started giving grants before the Sindh HEC, and I believe they have a higher amount that they award for the grants. And then Ignite, if you're aware, Ignite it used to be called the ICT RDF Fund. It falls under the Ministry of Information Technology, and its name changed over the period of time. Currently, it's being called Ignite, and Ignite offers grants in various areas. The Pakistan Science Foundation, of course, also offers research grants, and even within Pakistan, there are many other organizations which offer grants. Internationally, of course, you're well aware that the UN also offers grants, and then there are other countries. US, if you go to grants.gov, and there are USAID, like the speaker today, the chief guest, he spoke about the USAID grants. And in the EU, the Erasmus Mundus program, they offer grants. The SME, Small Medium Enterprise, they offer hefty grants. In some cases, of course, because these, as far as the international donors are concerned, you may or may not be eligible, but then you need to come into collaboration with someone who is eligible. So if you have a collaboration with European Union partner, then you might be able to submit a grant proposal for the EU. And by the way, if you fail in getting a grant, there's nothing to worry about. I usually say, if you fail, it means that you're trying to do something out of your comfort zone. So in fact, it is something to be appreciated if you fail, because if you fail, it means you're trying to do something different, right? If you were not trying to do anything different, then you would not fail. So it's perfectly fine. I myself have had many of my research papers rejected and grants rejected. So this is a natural part of learning. The Islamic Development Bank, the Asian Development Bank, all of these offer grants. And so there are various bodies and foundations, in fact. What are the different types of grants given? So some grants are research based. Some are development or operation based, such as focusing on the education or the healthcare, promoting entrepreneurship, alleviating poverty. So those fall under the category of development grants. In such grants, you are not actually producing new knowledge. You are not discovering any new knowledge, because it is not a research grant. But you are executing or operating a program that is of interest to the grantor or donor. And some grants are given for political purposes. In fact, you might be well aware that many countries, for the purposes of social engineering, they offer grants, and so in fact in many of the developing countries, many organizations end up taking grants from international donors, and which relate to mobilizing public opinion or building advocacy, so on and so forth. And then of course there are innovation commercialization grants as well, entrepreneurship related grants. If you have innovative idea, research concept which is worth commercializing, then you could obtain grants from the HEC, like I mentioned, the TDF, Technology Development Fund, and the National Science Foundation of the US has a SPIR program, and similarly the EU has a SME program. And so if you happen to know someone, and you can work, you collaborate with them, and you can submit grant proposals to these organizations as well. Now, some of these donors only require you to acknowledge them in your research writings. They don't expect anything more from you. And this is especially the case as far as research and development grants are concerned. However, when it comes to the commercialization grants, in which you are asking for some startup funds to start your company, you have a commercialization idea. And now in those kinds of grants, usually the donor also expects some equity share. Equity share in the sense that, let's suppose I have a business startup idea. I don't have the funds, but I apply for grant funding. I get the funds. Based on the funds, I build a team. I work on a project. I successfully build a product, and then I commercialize the product. Now the donor expects me that from the proceeds, from the profit, I should share some of the profits back to the donor. And so at the time of grant signing, contract signing, they require that 2%, 5%, 10% equity share be given to the grantor. So once the grantee is able to successfully develop a company, startup company, out of the funds, then they are required to contribute based on that equity share back to the donor. Now the question is, why do you want a grant? You might want a grant simply for money. So say, I'm not concerned with the knowledge aspect, I just need some money. That may very well be the case, and that's fine too. I might want the grant for fame. I want to show off. I want to tell people, how competent I am, let's say, and say that I'm able to win this grant, or it perhaps adds to one's professional profile. That also may be a very good legitimate reason it leads to self-fulfillment. A person gets the satisfaction that I was able to apply for a grant and I was able to win the grant, and that speaks about my credibility. So that is also one motivation for applying for a grant. Another purpose of you applying for a grant could be that you believe in the objectives that are defined by the grantor, and you want to fulfill and promote the objectives outlined by the grantor. So for example, if the grantor has outlined education or healthcare, let's say, providing much needed healthcare services to the poor population, and you believe in this cause, and therefore you apply for a grant and you get a grant, and you are able to not only win a grant and use the funds given by the grantor, but also serve the people to your satisfaction. And so this could also be a purpose of you applying for a grant. Another reason why you might want to apply for a grant is you want to acquire a different set of skills. So let's say you have been a faculty member or an academician, and you are a salaried person, and so you teach, you do some research, and life is all merry. But then you feel that you need to do something more. So you're not a businessman, and you're not a salesperson, and you're not in the marketing area. So how can you bring new revenue? How can you do some fund management? Because you're simply a faculty member. So the question is, how can you broaden your portfolio? And you feel that you have the skills and competencies within you, and so you want to expand your professional portfolio. So this gives you an excellent opportunity because when you apply for a grant, you're actually generating revenue, not only for yourself but also for your organization. Because when you apply, you normally apply on the basis of your organization, because as an individual you may not get the grant, but you apply as an individual on the platform of your organization, and that actually leads to your success. So you're benefiting not only yourself but the organization, your organization as well. So you naturally learn revenue generation, marketing, human resource management, because when you apply for a grant, you run a project, naturally you need a team of people with you, and when you need a team of people to work with you, then of course you have to do some human resource management. Then when you get the funds, you need to manage those funds. So this, of course, financial management also comes into play. And then overall, you need to make sure that the deliverables of the project are fulfilled, they are met, the deadlines are met, and so you also engage in project management, of course. And you also you might want to apply for a grant if you want to develop a business acumen for a self-sustaining model. Because if you apply for different grants and you get the grant, you get some work done, and then you apply for a different grant, you get some work done. So in other words, you are actually fulfilling your passion of getting the work done without actually paying anything out of your own pocket. So that also gives a nice business acumen to work with as well. And then if you have an idea of a startup and you have a jumpstart idea, but you don't have the funds, then this gives you an opportunity of developing that or jumpstarting that idea into a business product. And of course, you want to test and prove your competence and skills. So what are the attributes of a strong grant proposal? So first and foremost, it needs to be relevant to the objectives or the thematic areas defined in the invitation. When I say the invitation, I mean the RFPs. The NOFO means the request for proposal, notice of funding opportunity, or expression of interest, whatever you might like to call it, because different organizations use different terminology, and so that's why I'm using the word invitation. So you want to make sure that your proposal is relevant to the objectives or thematic areas given in the invitation, and you're fulfilling the eligibility criteria. And in this regard, if you have done homework on surveys, so let's suppose that you have conducted some basic survey and you have some statistical data to show, and you show that I conducted this survey with so many people, and this survey shows that it is very important to work on this particular area. So now this actually increases your chances of getting your grant funded. So, and if you can, of course, give the data in a graphical manner, it makes it much more visually appealing and convincing. The credibility and competence of the team and organization is, of course, very important. Herein, when you write your proposal, you need to, of course, elaborate, specify who is going to be part of your team, and what is the credential and profile of your team members, and of course your organization. So that actually adds to the likelihood of you getting the grant. Your objectives need to be smart, so to speak. Now, what do we mean by smart? S-M-A-R-T. So they need to be specific. Means the objectives should not be vague or open-ended. They should be clear and specific. They should be measurable, because how can the grantor know that you have fulfilled your objectives? If they are measurable, then you will be able to measure it, your grantor will be able to measure it, and then one will be able to ascertain or determine whether the objective was fulfilled or not. If it is not measurable, it will be open-ended, then of course it will be difficult to ascertain whether you have completed or not. It should be achievable. An objective which is unrealistic and unachievable will of course not lead you towards success. It needs to be realistic and time-bound. Time-bound in the sense that you need to specify by what time this objective will be fulfilled. Because if the objective is, if you don't give a time bound, then the grantor will suspect you whether you are serious about your work or not. So these 5 attributes are extremely important. So you need to have a well-defined strategy and methods and activities that correspond to the objectives. So the objectives, of course, need to be relevant to these objectives and areas defined in the RFP. And then for the objectives, you need to define the strategy and methods, activities that correspond to those objectives. And then for those activities, you need to define the time, the time parameter. Okay, and of course you need to explain this in the form of a timeline or Gantt chart. So, and we will briefly discuss what a Gantt chart means. So complying with the proposal requirements and template. So let's suppose your idea is very nice and it is all nicely written, but the format or template is not properly fulfilled. So when the grantor or donor gives you a template to fulfill and certain requirements, you need to make sure that those requirements and template is complied with. So because otherwise, even though your project might very well be worth it, but it could end up being rejected if it does not comply with the templates and requirements of the grantor. If you can also specify in your grant proposal the various partnerships you're going to have with different organizations and with different stakeholders, that adds to your credibility. Because remember that the grantor would like the impact of their grant to be as far and wide reaching as possible, right? So the grantor would want their name to go as far as possible, as wide as possible with the services of the grant. So if you are working with different partners with the same amount of money, naturally the grantor would be much happier. So and so this will have much greater outreach and create much greater impact. So other attributes of strong proposal are sustainability beyond funding. If you can articulate in your research or rather grant proposal, if you can articulate in your grant proposal that even beyond the scope of the project, you will be able to continue and sustain your activities, then it is a plus point. Then this is something that is desired and appreciated by the grantor or donor, because the grantor or donor has certain objectives, and if you are able to fulfill those objectives even when the funding stops, then of course this will be appreciated by the donor. So if you are able to establish how you will bring about sustainability, especially financial sustainability in your work even beyond the completion of the project, that adds to your credibility and your chances of getting funding. If you have a realistic and reasonable budget, then once again this increases your chances of getting funding, and of course it should correspond to the activities and objectives of the grant. If you are able to specify the monitoring and outcomes, so for example, I define the scope of my project, I define the deliverables, I define the objectives, and I also tell the grantor how my work can be monitored and evaluated. If I can specify key performance indicators and I say that, look, this is the objective, this is the goal that I'm going to be fulfilling, and this is how you can assess whether I have fulfilled my goal or not. And so when you begin to provide the mechanisms of evaluating yourself, of course, this makes it much more likely for the grantor to award you the grant. So you want to also, you also want to write the monitoring and outcomes aspect, and you want to define the key performance indicators. Also, as far as your writing is concerned, if your proposal is free from writing errors, then that speaks professionalism. If you make typographical errors, and you might consider them unimportant, if you consider them unimportant, then the grantor will consider you unimportant. So bear in mind, if you take your work seriously, then people will take you seriously. But if you don't take your work seriously, then the grantor will not take you seriously. And when you make basic mistakes, it shows that it shows a lack of professionalism. And so it's very important that such kinds of errors are not found in your work. Of course, I'm sure you're well aware of the 17 SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals, and so described by the UN. So if somehow your grant articulates how you are addressing these Sustainable Development Goals, or you're addressing a subset or some of those goals, then that also increases your chances of obtaining a grant. So, of course, as if you're working on a research grant proposal, then you want to make sure that your research gap is well articulated, the need of the problem, what others have not done, and of course, we already discussed the claims and justification of the claims, and so. So now, what is the key to winning a grant? You need to have a strong need statement satisfying the funder, not addressing your own need. So you need to be clear about this, because in order to impress the grantor, you need to make sure that you address the needs of the grantor. The grantor is least concerned about your own needs, because you're not the one giving money. The one giving money is the grantor, of course. And so you want to state the credentials of the organization to satisfy the need of the grantor. You want to present stories in smooth narrative form to describe the need. So this especially comes in handy as far as development grants are concerned, because if, let's say, coming back to the SDGs, let's suppose you are working in the SDG number 2, reducing hunger, let's say. So if you are able to, while writing your grant proposal, if you narrate how hunger is affecting people of your local community, and if you describe certain stories together with pictures and together with empirical data, then that actually gives not only a compelling story, but it also increases your chances of getting funding. Similarly, let's suppose if you talk about number 6, the SDG, clean water and sanitation. If you describe stories of how polluted water is being given in certain communities, and you describe not only stories, pictures, and some empirical data, then once again that adds to your chances of getting funding. So, so you want to present stories in narrative to describe or to rather to address the need. You need to understand the funder, because if you understand what kinds of grants they have given in the past, and then you get an idea of the likelihood of you successfully obtaining the grant. Because if the crux of your grant is closely aligned with the not only the thematic areas, but also based on past experience, you get an idea of what the grantor has previously donated, then this will increase your chances of success. Of course, you want to be in compliance with funding and proposal guidelines. So you want to make sure that whatever guidelines specified in the RFP or in the expression of interest, the invitation, the more compliance you provide, the higher your chances of of course, your proposal is eventually going to be evaluated by a panel of experts, so you need to bear that in mind. And once you get rejection, this is perfectly fine, nothing to worry about. Perseverance is key, but you need to find out why the grant was not awarded so that you can revise and then resubmit accordingly. Now, of course, with the commercialization grants, they often require a business plan to be submitted with the grant proposal. And commercialized innovative ideas are often coming from the academia. And in such grants, you want to collaborate with the industry for market outreach. So if you have any idea, research, commercialization idea, then I would strongly suggest you to work in collaboration with the industry, because this will increase the chances of your success. Because this will add credibility to your proposal. As far as the business plan is concerned, people of the management sciences are well aware. So you would need to give an executive summary, a business description, marketing strategies, customers and product pricing strategy, and we'll briefly discuss about these. The competitors and competitive analysis, supply chains, possible challenges of potential disruption, the design and development plan, the operations and management plan, financial factors, so on and so forth. So in the business description, you want to make sure that you give the market segment and the niche areas where you feel that you have a potential for success, and wherein you describe your potential customers which could have a demand for your product, the nature of the problem and the value of the solution, and how your solution addresses the problem, and how customers can subscribe or purchase this service or product. In the marketing strategies, you need to specify how you are going to approach or access the customers, how you're going to advertise, how you're going to use networking to make sure that your product goes out there through product service, demos, videos, instruction material, launching website or social media marketing, whatever tools you are going to adopt. As far as the customers and pricing strategy, you want to make sure that you have a clear idea in mind regarding the different kinds of customers that you could potentially have, and what kind of features your product could have for different kinds of customers. So often at times, when of course when companies make a product, it is not just the cost that goes into building a product that leads to its price. It is actually the value that the customer gives to that particular product which actually drives the price. Okay, so you could have so even let's suppose you have a product A, product B, and product C. So the cost of producing product C may not be much different from product B and product A, but the pricing would depend on the class of customers which would aspire for product C versus product B versus product A. So you need to be smart in that respect and frame your features and pricing accordingly. So as far as the product gap and competitive analysis, you need to make sure that you're well aware of your competitors, your distant competitors and your near competitors. And so you need to have a good idea of the features or lack of the features thereof in the existing competitors, and the need for relevant features and services, and how the proposed product or your service fills the gap. As far as the supply chain, you need to make sure that you know what are the possible challenges to the supply chain. So let's suppose if there are any components or parts that need to be used in the building of your product, then you need to be well aware of what kind of disruptions the competitor could cause in the supply chain and how such disruptions can be overcome, or how could the risks be mitigated. Now, this is just an example of a project timeline or Gantt chart. This is actually from one of my old projects. I know on the screen it may not be very visible, but just it gives you a visual understanding of, let's suppose, so this is the first deliverable, and the first deliverable needs to be completed before this can happen. However, the third task you can see can be initiated before the completion of the second task, and so on and so forth. So you want to describe in terms of the timeline, and of course the horizontal axis here gives the timeline in terms of the quarters and months. So if you organize your design and develop your plan timeline in the form of Gantt chart, it makes the reader easy to understand. And now you need to describe your operations and management team. Now this depends on the nature of your project. Now normally in research projects, the head of the project is called the PI, the principal investigator. Now in commercialization grants, the head of the project is often referred to as project manager. In development grants, normally the head of the project is termed the project director. So this varies depending on the nature of the grant. So this just gives you an example that this is the head of the project. So this is the project manager, and then you have a manager marketing and sales working under. You have a manager accounts and admin, an assistant IT, customer support, some technical people working on the project, and then you have some coordinator as well. So this depends really on the nature of the project, but you need to be very clear about the team of people that you need to have to make your project successful. Now the financial projection, you want to make sure that you describe in terms of the financial projections for the coming years as well. So let's suppose in the first year, as you can see that what we have shown here is that there is no income, and so there are only expenses, and therefore the net income is negative. In the second year, we have shown that the income, there is some income, but the expenses are much greater, and therefore we have a small deficit as far as the net income is concerned. Going into the third year, what we are showing is that the income has risen substantially, and the expenses are pretty much the same as the previous years, and therefore we have a small positive net income. And in the fourth year, what we are trying to articulate, as you can see in the bar chart, is that the income has increased substantially, the expenses are pretty much the same, and therefore the net income has also increase, and it continues for the subsequent years. So of course this has to be supported by data. So you cannot just put fancy bar chart pictures and expect to impress the grantors, but you need to justify on what basis you expect that the income is to rise in year 2 and year 3 and year 4 and so on and so forth. So that you need to specify in your project description. So this is a larger financial projection for a 7-year period. And herein you actually describe the gross income, where it's going to come from, and the expenses that are going to be incurred. So now, as far as preparing the budget is concerned, remember that when you're writing your grant, I would say perhaps the foremost important part is really working on the budget. So you need to have a clear understanding about the budget. Now, the budget will comprise of the personnel, meaning the team that you will have working for you on this project. And when it comes to the personnel, so let's say you have 5 or 6 people working. Now, some of those people will be working full-time. Some of those people will be working 25% of their time. Some of them will be giving only 10% of their time. So when preparing your budget, you need to keep that into consideration. So so if I go back over here, and let's say we have these, how many? Total 7 people in the team, for example. If I say that these technical people, 2 technical people, these people will be working full-time. And let's suppose their salary is 100,000 each. Okay. Then in the budget, in the personnel, I will need to put those 2 people over here for 100,000 each per month. Okay. Now, as far as this project manager is concerned, he's not working full-time. He is only going to give maybe 10% of his time for this project. Okay, only 10% of his time for this project. But the salary of that project manager for a full-time status is, let's suppose, 400,000. Okay, so means that person whose full-time salary is 400,000, but that person is working only 10% of the time. So that person will be charging 40,000 rupees over here for 10% of the time. Now, normally what happens is that, okay, so if there are 40 hours a week, 40 hours in a week, so if you're working 4 hours, then that means 10%, right? Normally, when you get funding for a proposal for grant, then even if you're working, let's say, minimum 4 hours, then it is normally considered acceptable if you charge 1.5 or maximum 2 times. So instead of charging 10%, you charge 15% or 20% perhaps. Because it is not just the time that you're giving, but it is that window of opportunity that not only are you availing, but also the grantor is availing by getting the services of a top cadre professional or individual. So, but if you begin to charge more than 20% for 10% of the work, that is considered ethically incorrect. So just to give you an idea, now this could be in terms of hours, it could be calculated in terms of days, it could also be calculated in terms of the time. So let's say 10% of the time, 15% of the time. I hope this part is clear. So for example, the project, let's say if you say that the project manager will give 30 days, okay, it means whatever the duration of the project. So maybe its project is of 2 years or 3 years, but the project manager will give 30 full days of work for this entire project. Okay, so then you will do the costing based on the number of days. Or you could do it on the percentage of time, saying that the project manager will spend maybe 10% or 15% of his time on the project. Or you could calculate it based on the number of hours. So the rate is actually the function of the salary. So it depends. So you might have a top cadre professional whose salary maybe is 20 lakhs per month. So if that person gives you 10% of their time, then of course, even for that 10% of their time, they will be charging at least 2 lakh rupees. On the other hand, if you have an employee who's giving their full time, but because their market salary is 50,000 rupees, so even if they're working full time, still they will get only 50,000 rupees on the project. So it really depends on whom you have on your team. So this is the first part that you need to write in for the budget, the personnel. The second, often at times, is the travel. So travel will include the transport, accommodation. For example, if you are organizing an event, let's suppose in Islamabad, so you fly to Islamabad, so you're bearing the cost of the air tickets, and then you end up staying 2 or 3 days in a hotel, so you keep that into account, and then also the daily allowance. So this, for example, in some country in the US, for example, they usually call it per diem, and in different places they say TADA, traveling allowance, domestic allowance. But essentially that's the daily allowance that is given. And then the equipment. So let's suppose if you are buying a machine to conduct your experiments, or for example, if you need to buy some laptops for working on your project, or any other kind of printers or any machines, that will all fall under the equipment category. And you would need to, of course, specify the budget. Or any supplies. Supplies means any consumables, any stationery, or any food that, for example, if you're organizing an event, then you have different guests coming in, and you would cater to their food and other activities. Now, there's also something called the indirect cost. Now, indirect cost means that if you are working in an organization, and when you apply for a grant, even though you're applying individually, but you are applying on the platform of your organization. So in other words, if you are working full-time salaried person in an organization, and you're obtaining a grant, so you're already working full-time. Now, if you work on this grant, that means you will be spending some time for the grant. That means that amount of time you will not be giving to your organization, right? That is quite obvious. So if, let's say, I'm working 40 hours in my organization, and I obtain a grant, and I say that I'm going to work 20% of my time for the grant project. So that means that either I'll be working 120%, okay, or I'll be giving 80% of my time to my own organization, okay. So now different organizations have different formula to address this issue. In some organizations, what they do is they subtract a portion of your salary. Now that will not be 20%, that will maybe be 10%, because you're getting 20% from the grantor, and so your organization subtracts 10% from your remuneration. In some cases, the organization does not subtract any amount, and now, so because you're working on the platform of your organization, you're using the resources of your organization, keeping into consideration the grantor gives some amount to your organization, okay, and this is considered indirect cost, and also it is sometimes called institutional overhead, and that is usually a percentage of the subtotal. So for example, if the total worth of your project was 1 crore rupees, okay, then the grantor might give 15 lakh rupees to your organization as 15% institutional overhead or indirect cost. So in other words, when you apply for a grant using the platform of your organization, the organization administration could think, what's the benefit of our organization? So you can tell them that, okay, I'm getting this grant, I am getting some salary in my personnel budget, but I am also getting you 15% of the overall grant. So therefore, the organization or the institution is also being served handsomely. So you get the idea, right? So because it is very important that the platform that you are using, the resources that you are using, that organization is also taken care of. And this is normally the case in almost all grants given by grantors. Then there are some other direct costs such as rentals, etc. Now, as far as the budget heads are concerned, it really varies from donor to donor. In the case of HEC, for example, you will see that you will have a section called salaries and honorarium. This is for the personnel. And then you will have a section on permanent equipment, a section on expendable supplies, a section on others, and then indirect cost. Now, you might be aware that previously HEC used to award only 2% indirect cost to the universities if they did not have ORIC offices. And then if they had ORIC offices, they would extend the indirect cost to 15%. And this was also an incentive, a motivation for establishing ORICs across universities in Pakistan. And of course, the benefits of the purpose behind the ORIC is much broader, to support research, commercialization, to support entrepreneurship, to support career development, and so on and so forth. And it really gives an added dimension to the role and function of a university. And Alhamdulillah, our university has worked a lot in this area. So these are some of the terms used by HEC when defining the budget. These are some other terms used in various other donors, and I'm just mentioning some of them just to give you an idea, but you should know what the terminology or the terms means. So sometimes they use the word personnel, salary, and fringe benefits. Now, when they say fringe benefits, it means that you are not only drawing a salary from your organization, you are also getting insurance benefits, maybe other perks and privileges. So all of that combined actually gives your figure for your remuneration, which includes your salary and other benefits. So, and then there's the travel or supplies, equipment, other direct costs, and indirect costs, of course, you're already familiar. Now, once your budget is approved, then reappropriation is very challenging, and it is not very common. So you want to make sure that when you write your proposal, you get it right the first time. And you want to keep a certain amount of cushion in your budget for any kind of expenses. Now, this really depends on your experience on how you keep that cushion, how you make it practical, and at the same time you do not violate the conditions and requirements of the donor. And often at times there is often also a percentage limit of transfer from one head to another. I remember one grant we were working on, and later on, halfway through the project, we realized that we were saving some amount in one head, but we were consuming more amount in another head. So overall, we were within the budget, but then our grantor denied us from transferring amount from one head to another head. In fact, I clearly remember they said that only up to 10% of the amount of within a particular head could be transferred to another head, but not more than that. So there are some guidelines that you need to be aware of when preparing the budget, because preparing a budget is really a technical aspect of the grant writing. So you need to have a good team of people who can do the accounting and bookkeeping for you, maintaining the receipts, funds transfer, and all that detail. And also, as a project manager, you need to have a good eye on the financial procedures so that you can keep things under control. So what are the typical contents of a grant proposal? So of course you would have a cover letter followed by an executive summary, need statement or background providing the relevance of the project, the project description, all of which we talked about, the goals, timelines, performance indicators. Remember, the performance indicators are actually you providing the grantor on how to assess you. So, so that's the performance indicators. The budget and financial projections, the project team and CVs. So of course the project team is extremely important, as we mentioned earlier. The stronger your team, the higher chances your project has of getting approval and getting funding. And you also need to provide the CVs of your team members. And then the conclusion. So let's say you are successfully able to obtain the grant. Now what you should do? Okay, now once you have obtained the grant, now of course it is in an ethical and moral binding upon you to make sure that the funds given by the grantor or donor are put to proper use. Okay, and so this also speaks about not only your professionalism but also your ethical and moral conduct. And so you need to be very vigilant in your project management, and you need to make sure that you ensure the goals and achieve the milestones, because you need to be very goal oriented, and you need to be very clear about the goals, and you need to make sure that you are able to meet the deadlines. So you should be well versed in human resource management, because of course you need to lead your team and make sure that the deadlines are met and the deliverables are also met. And you need to do the progress reporting on a periodic basis as well, because remember that the grantor will not just give you the grant and then sleep for 2 or 3 years. The grantor will ask you on a periodic basis to submit the progress reports. And so you need to be so it's not just working on the project itself, but the documentation aspect and the administrative overhead required to make sure that the grantor's satisfaction is met. That part is also extremely important. The fulfillment of the objectives of the grant. This really speaks volumes about your own conscientiousness and your professionalism. The financial management, of course, your prudence of being goal-oriented, having strong integrity, the ethical considerations, keeping into consideration that it's actually the taxpayers' money, and also keeping the funders' purpose in mind, because this is actually a trustworthy matter. Normally, the grant that you get from a government, where does the government get its funds from? It's actually the taxpayers' money. So it means someone else has actually paid for that money, right? So if you think about it as a trust, then you need to raise your standards of ethical and moral consideration and ensure that the goals and objectives and the purposes of the grants are fulfilled. Also, the audit and reporting. So once you have obtained the grant, or once you have completed or finished the execution of the grant, now the donor or the grantor will ask you for the financial receipts. So you need to have all the invoices, checks, bank statements with you. You need to have all the quotations, the advertisements for the procurement, and all the staff timesheets, the payroll sheets, salary slips. So you need to make sure that you have all this documentation in place. You need to make sure that you have the surveys done that you wanted to show as far as doing your homework is concerned, the achievement of the key performance indicators showing that your project has been a success. So all of that work, the analysis, the assessment, the surveys, all of those need to be done. So now I'm going to go back and where we began to talk about the competencies and skills. So so remember we talked about acquiring the right kind of skills, now you can get a good idea that you'll be doing revenue generation, marketing, human resource management, financial management, project management as a whole. And so in order to get adept at all of these, you will need to do all those that we mentioned a short while ago. And so it might seem boring, but then there's a lot of administrative work that goes into managing the grant. So what are some of the common challenges that you could face as a grantee or donee or a fundee? So you could have some problems in not getting the right kind of support from your host or parent institution. Because often at times what happens is that the grant does not come to your bank account. Of course, the grant goes into the bank account of your organization. And of course, the bank accounts of your organization are operated by the administrative heads of your organization. And sometimes if the nature of expenses that you require needs to be done at a much quicker speed, and the administrative officers are not able to work with the pace that you want to work with, then you could face some problems. And then also, I have heard people, some colleagues working in other institutions where they reported that they had all kinds of other unethical problems, practices from their host or parent institution organization as well. Achieving goals within the budget. Now remember, if you don't frame your budget properly, realistically, you prepare your budget in a haste and in an optimistic with an optimistic mindset, hoping that you will be able to manage everything perfectly, and then with the meager budget that you asked for and the meager funds that you received, and then you realize that you are unable to fulfill the goals and objectives. So you need to be very savvy when preparing the budget so that you can achieve your goals. Now, another challenge that is often faced by grantees or donees is managing their partner relationships. Because remember that when you have a staff of people working under you, then things are much easier. But when you are partnering with other organizations, then it is much more difficult. It takes good leadership skills, relation building skills to foster good working relationships with your partners. You could have technical issues with the staff management, planning, and risk mitigation. And of course, having competent accounting personnel. This is extremely important. So as a project manager yourself, if you have good accounting skills, if you are aware of the basic accounting practices, if you have a mind for numbers, then it makes it much easier for you to ensure that the financial accounting is done properly. Otherwise, you could have problems working with your team. So it's very important to maintain the receipts, checks, staff sheets, expenditure within heads, and compliance with the policies, and reconciling with the bank statement. So these are all essential aspects. And you also need to make sure that the grantor transfers the funds in a timely manner, because sometimes there are issues at the grantor's end, and how do you address those issues at your end is once again depends on your experience. And there are various ways of getting around this, but this is a genuine problem, and this is often faced when you execute grants, whether there are local grants or international grants. Issuance of checkbooks, timely payments, etc., etc. So now, once you complete your grant, often at times your project is also audited. So now when the auditors come, and of course I don't mean to scare you away, but these are all challenges that come with this. But the good thing is you learn a lot, okay, and it adds to your competencies and skills. But it's very important that you have all the paperwork in place so that you can satisfy the auditors as well. So finally, what makes a good grant proposal? It should be easy to understand, and it should have a flow with continuity. It should be clear and concise. It should be doable and realistic. It should clearly outline what will be done. It should have a compelling narrative, and it should be visually appealing. If you have pictures with graphical charts depicting the data, describing the data, it makes it much easier to understand. As they say, a picture is worth 1,000 words. And it also makes it much more visually appealing. Because if whatever you have written makes it difficult or hard for the other person to understand, that is not likely to impress the reviewer. The chances are that the reviewer will end up rejecting your proposal if they are unable to understand what you have articulated. So your proposal should present a clear picture and engage the reader. The language, the flow and continuity should be such that the reader is continuously engaged. It gives evidence of past success. If you can also articulate how you have in the past been successful in executing similar research projects or endeavors or conducting surveys, then this speaks volumes about the prospects of you succeeding in the future as well. So what's a bad grant proposal? Of course, if you have a lack of clarity and no clear outcomes, plenty of errors, unachievable expectations, if your proposal or project is not aligned with the grantor or funder requirements, if it is boring to read and difficult to understand. So finally, in the conclusion, grant writing gives you a great opportunity to grow and pursue whatever cause you want to pursue. If you don't have the funds, you get the added leverage of a donor or a grantor giving you the funds so that you can pursue your passions. So it gives you an excellent opportunity there. It gives you an opportunity to build your team and demonstrate leadership. It gives you financial incentive, not only to you, your team, your organization, and it gives you an opportunity to enhance your skills, raise your eminence, and build your image of not only yourself, the individual, but also the organization. What is really important here is the ethics and integrity part. Because remember, when you ask for funds from a donor, then you need to make sure that the objectives are fulfilled not only in letter but also in spirit. See, the reason why I say this is because your integrity and credibility goes a long way. So, and you need to make sure that you protect and promote the national interest and cause as well. So with that, thank you very much. If you have any questions, you're most welcome to ask.
So nice and so thoroughly. It was very thoughtful. Really, in my life, I have been learning many. I am a research man of the research as well. Many of the our friends are here. So, sir, thank you very much. Basically, it was very nice for our faculty members as well, because this was the need of the day to do all these things in this university, and I hope this is going to be taken over. And I would like to appreciate that you have addressed sustainable development goals, which is the need of the day, and we have to go for this opportunity to get all our research proposals through this SNGD. So thank you very much, and I really appreciate the efforts, and your project so nice. Thank you.
So the SDGs, as you are well aware, even when we frame the final year projects of our bachelor students, it has become very important that we, from the 17 SDGs, we mention which SDGs are relevant to the final year project. And also for any master's or PhD thesis, when writing your proposal, it's a good idea to align with some of the SDGs.
So any other? I'm sorry, sir. In this regard, we are already working on SNGD 6, because that is safe drinking water, and my PhD is in environmental engineering, and I have artificial intelligence, artificial networks modeling as well. So we are working on that, and I would like to appreciate our faculty members, because already they are now giving their final projects, and I have directed them to look into this matter, that either these topics from FYP and FYP 1 and 2, they should be basically from these addressing these SNGDs. So this is one of the aspects that we can try for. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Any other questions anyone would like to ask?
Sir, thank you very much. Very informative your lecture was today, and it is a guideline to the young researchers, and there is a good opportunity given to the students to apply for that. And as far as the engineering is concerned, there are so many projects can be done for energy process projects for the rural areas that can be developed and can we get the funding. So Alhamdulillah, you have covered all aspects in your lectures. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Sir, I do have a question.
Sure.
Many researchers write the background of the research, and some researchers write the introduction as well. So what is the basic difference between these two? Some are writing only background, some are writing an introduction as well. So how do we differentiate among these two?
Right. So normally the first chapter is often referred to as the introduction. That's how it's titled. And the introduction contains the background. So in essence, the way a student could approach it, or a student could see this issue as, first they need to write their problem. Now, once they write their problem, they begin to think about if an ordinary reader were to read this problem, would they understand it or not understand it? They would require some background, and then they should write the background. So even though the background is written, it comes first when you read the thesis, but as far as writing is concerned, you first write the problem statement. So, and then you read the problem statement and you see whether a normal reader would be able to understand it or not, and what are the missing pieces that need to be communicated first in order for the reader to understand the problem. All of those missing pieces need to come in the background. So that is how one should see it. And so all of this comprises the introduction. Yes.
Thank you so much.
Yes, please. Right, so they become partners in the shares in terms of getting profit. So they're not necessarily required to put in any amount of work, of course, and so the burden of work, of course, you have taken upon yourself as a project manager or project director. But then when your startup company is registered, then the grantor, if they claim certain rights, 2%, 4%, or 8%, whatever, then they will have an ownership stake in the company. And so whatever proceeds of profit, they will be entitled to a share of it. Yes, that is perfectly. So sleeping partner is more like an informal term. So a partner is one who is entitled to the profits. So they are entitled to the profits, irrespective of whether they're sleeping or they're awake. So, okay. Any other questions anyone would like to ask? Yes.
Thank you so much, sir. Sir, you showed the Gantt chart in which the timeline was there clearly. So when we are working on a research project, there are strong chances that our plan can go the other way around. So how much margin should be kept for that particular float should be there, that just in case our prediction goes wrong, so how much timeline should we reserve for that, so that we don't come up to the stage when we really need to revise the plan, because that's something need to be care of.
Right, that's a very good question. Now, please do bear in mind that Gantt charts are normally given in the case of business plans when you are asking for a commercialization grant. As far as a research grant is concerned, even then, for applying for a research grant, in some cases you might be required to give a Gantt chart. Now, as far as what kind of cushion you need to give yourself, that it's one cannot give a hard and fast or cut and dry answer into this. It's really variable and it's subjective, and it also depends on the nature of the project. So if you give too much cushion, then of course it raises eyebrows. If you give too little cushion, then you make life difficult for yourself. So you really have to strike a balance in between. So there's no objective, you can say, guideline over here. One could, throw off and say that 10% or 15% of the time, but practically speaking, it really depends, and it's subjective, and it varies depending on the nature of the project. Okay, any other questions? Okay, so this concludes the first session, and I'm sure I am eagerly awaiting for lunch the way you are. so I believe after lunch we have the second session in which we'll begin discussing the review of the mock review. So you've been handed out a mock review of 2 pages. Please feel free to take 10-15 minutes of your time and go over it. And so then in the next session, then we'll be able to talk about it. Okay, thank you. Assalamu alaikum.